Other third-party plugins, we have over the course of the past year run into some that do not support our platform out of the box.
For a number of reasons. Mono support, .NET support.
Right. So the editor runs Mono. Other platforms compile against Mono.NET.
Yeah.
Windows Store, Windows Phone compiles against .NET for WinRT and Windows Phone. And Jaime is going to go in again into that in more depth on Thursday.
Yeah.
And what the runtime differences look like. So if you're nerdy,
low-level developers.
Yeah, if you're nerdy like us,
yeah.
And you want to delve into that kind of thing and see how the guts of the runtime works, definitely tune into that on Thursday.
So I think it's actually a tool to help us really discern what will and will not work on each platform.
Yeah.
iOS, Android, Windows.
Xamarin's good.
Yes.
Yeah. Xamarin, scan.xamarin.com. They've got a great tool to upload a DLL and select your target platform. And hey, is this API set compatible with that platform?
How mobile is your .NET, right? Will it work everywhere,
exactly.
or will it just work on these specific platforms?
Yeah, and it's really great for that. Thank you, Xamarin, for publishing that out on the web. I've used it many, many times.
Yep, you can look at executables or dynamically linked libraries, DLLs.
Yep, and so I've used it many times.
As have I.
I will say the plugin library is growing and growing and getting better.
Yeah.
If you run across one that is not working for you, please, again, reach out to an evangelist at Microsoft, and we can engage those developers and get them working on our platform. If it's something you need and you're working with one of us, definitely let us know so that we can address that. Loaner devices, let's talk about that.
Okay, I like free hardware.
Yeah. So, I need a little bit of wording here on the first bullet point. Your local evangelist can likely loan you a developer device.
There are no guarantees in world.
It depends on what region you're in, what part of the world you're in. A lot of moving parts to that.
How many are available at that point?
Yeah, how many are available?
Yeah.
Right. So the best way to find out is to find your local evangelist. We've got this great directory on MSDN that helps you do that. I've got the link here, aka.ms, find my evangelist. So you can find one of those. I'm in Dallas, so if anybody from Dallas is watching, please reach out to me at Jason G. Fox on Twitter or jason.fox@microsoft.com for any of this stuff. Loaner devices, any advice on Unity, publishing your game, anything like that.
We're here to work with you and help build communities around gaming and game development in many of the larger cities around the country and the world.
And we can also help out with BizSpark programs.
Yeah.
The Unity developer offer. So
beautiful.
This is new. You can get a device through this. It does require that you publish your application first. It can be in a beta state, so you can put it out into the store as a beta. So it's not actually released to the world yet, but you can add your friends' accounts on there and let them test the game.
Right.
Once you get to that point, the person running the offer will be able to send you a test device to start debugging on.
As part of our own ongoing relationship and growing relationship with Unity and Microsoft.
Yep. And so it's great, the level 1. Level 2, let's go. Oh, there's no slide.
Windows Phone, so wpdevcenteroffers.com will have all the information.
Let's actually just go to the site.
Perfect.
Since we don't have...
Looks like we have 2 tiers at the moment, level 1 and level 2. Why don't you zoom in a little bit real quick there, so I can get a better understanding of what level 1 and 2 actually entail. Okay,
so create or port your game.
Okay.
Right? So if you've got a great innovative game on another platform that meets some kind of minimum download requirements, then we definitely want you to apply to this. You get this is a great way to get Windows 8.1.
Yep.
$100 voucher to the Unity Asset Store. That's
sounds
huge,
good to me.
Right? I could go buy ProBuilder or whatever right now, right?
Right. Or any additional plugins you just don't have or looking at. I mean, ShaderForge just won a bunch of awards at Unite 2 weeks ago. So
that one developer device bullet point there, that's what we were just talking about. So you can choose a phone. Priority review for Windows Store promotion. That's huge.
Yeah.
For marketing, discoverability, user acquisition, all these great terms for getting discovered in the store and selling your game and making money.
Level 2 looks like it has everything level 1 has and even more. So why don't we go into detail about that?
Yeah. And so once you get through level 1, you can get promoted. And I think there's a selection process for this up to level 2. And we're looking for the universal apps on this at this point, right? Again, if you go down to the benefits, we get 1 million impressions from ad duplex.
Can't say no to that.
$1,000.
I like it.
A free advertising, that's awesome.
Anything free is for me.
A voucher to the Microsoft Store, so I can go on there and maybe I can apply that to a new device, or maybe I don't have an Xbox One yet. I can put it towards that.
Perfect. We just have a nice price drop for it.
I can buy the collector edition of Destiny,
which just came out today. Yeah, we should actually go play that as soon as.
Did you bring your Xbox One?
No, but I thought about it though.
Yeah, darn. Okay. Anyways, so feature placement in the Made with Unity gallery. Again, that's huge advertisement for your game.
Absolutely.
That is on the Unity 3D website. People clicking through and they go, oh, okay, I've got a Windows Phone. I want to see what games are available for Windows Phone from Unity.
Yeah.
Or built with Unity.
It's essentially their showcase.
Yeah, and you get into that gallery. It's great. And again, the priority review for promotion.
Okay.
Top 3 candidates each month.
This is the biggest selling point for me.
Unity Pro license.
I like that.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, can't say no to that.
Up to $1,500 in value.
Holy cow.
The other thing that I thought was interesting.
And this is brand new.
This is really cool. I just noticed this the other day. Top 3 candidates get priority consideration for the ID at Xbox program.
Right. So it doesn't mean you're going to the program. It means that they are guaranteed to take a look at your title and work with your team to understand where your current goals are.
Yeah, that's great. That's all I have. We got anything else?
No, I think it's been a fantastic day of kind of working together.
Thanks, everybody. I think do we need some promo for tomorrow? Okay. Please take the poll.
Yep, so if you notice at the bottom of your chat screen right there, there'll be a poll asking questions about perhaps where you're located in the country, where your current role is, whether you're a student, a developer, or even a Microsoft employee. So please take time to answer those questions.
Thank you for attending today. We do have 5 more modules of great content tomorrow.
What time is that starting at? Do you know?
9 a.m., right? Same time, 9 a.m. in the morning, Pacific Standard Time, US, right? So we'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, thanks again, everyone. This is Jason Fox. I'm David Voiles. Thank you for joining us today.
There's a little preview of some things to come. Welcome back to developing 2D and 3D games with Windows, with Unity on Windows. Welcome to day number 2. We also have a great day of content for you. I'm just excited today, as I was yesterday, and I was pretty amped yesterday. So this is going to be a good day. We've got all sorts of great topics, but Matt, a little bit about yourself first.
So I'm an indie game designer. I have my own studio called Subscience Studios. We're based out of Orange County, California. Recently completed work on a game for the band Avenged Sevenfold, coming out soon for all mobile devices. Before that, I did a game called Grave Stompers, which was kind of a zombie-based game, which fits in nicely with what we're doing today. You can check that out on all devices. And then, I've worked as a digital artist for about 12 years in the industry. Started in music and entertainment back in the day, kind of got into websites, and then fell into games about 4 or 5 years ago, and I've just been doing it ever since. So, love games and excited to show you guys what we got going on today.
Pretty cool. Definitely check out your website, MatthewNewman.net, where you have some cool tutorials up there. The Rhino, I think, is going to be posted up there from yesterday.
Yeah, the Rhino from yesterday. So if anybody saw what I got started with yesterday, we're actually going to have the full version of that up. Probably, by the end of the day today, we'll show that off and people can download that. And also, there's a lot of speed painting tutorials and stuff like that if you want to see that. But anyways, let's get started. And
I'm Adam Tuliper. I was here for a lot of the day yesterday, going to be here for a lot of the day today. Great day. I'm a technical evangelist with Microsoft. I'm out of Southern California. Been working many years as a software architect. Check me out on Adam Tuliper at Twitter. And why don't we get rolling to talk about some really cool stuff and where we're going to go with the day today. We're going to start with optimizing your games. Then we're going to go into ALM and Unity, learn about Visual Studio Online and source control with Unity. Tobias got a great talk on marketing and monetizing your application, an area that developers greatly lack in. Using Prime 31 to connect your Unity game to Azure comes in Module 9. And finally, in Module 10, adding the finishing touches, integrating with things like live tiles and some platform features to make your game just pop a little bit more.
Cool.
All right, let's get started with optimizing your game, shall we?
Yeah, the single most important part. Before you
part.
ship your product or anything's done, you always have to optimize. And that's just to guarantee a couple things, right? One, you want to make sure your game runs super smooth, and this is the best way to do it. You want to make sure there's no hiccups or any extra memory hog issues, anything like that. This is what optimizing your game is all about. So there's a couple of topics we're going to copy on this, but I think to start, we're going to go over baking lights.
Baking light, we're going to do optimizing draw calls, we're going to be doing compression, coding techniques, we're going to be talking about terrain and skyboxes, and reducing geometry. Now, this is not a completely all-encompassing list, but these are some good things to get you started.
Yeah.
And so let's go ahead and start with baking light, what baking light is all about.
Absolutely.
So baking light in Unity, there's a third-party engine, Beast, from Illuminate Labs. This essentially, baking light calculates lighting for all the static objects in your scene. Static objects are objects that aren't going to move, as opposed to ones that are charged with electricity and shock you during the winter. These are static objects, they're not going to move anywhere. Calculates the lighting for them, how light is going to hit them, and opposed to doing it at runtime, calculates it all ahead of time, saves it out to a texture. So the pros for that is it gives you much better performance because it's not having to do all these calculations at runtime. And while hardware has really come a long way and it can do a lot of this at runtime, it's better to save it for the cooler stuff in your games, like little zombie guys running around and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
The downside of this technique is it takes up potentially a lot of space to calculate. You'll see in your project, it can definitely grow quite a bit, and it also does not apply to dynamic objects. This is just static, but we are going to talk about dynamic objects with light probes and how to handle light probes as well.
There are some techniques to kind of fake that whole process, but make it seem like it's actually running in real time, which is great. So we'll show you those as well.
Let's talk about the process here. Very important to do things, for the most part, in this order. And so it seems sometimes when I go through this, I kind of miss a step at a time. So it's good to have it kind of written out. Must mark all the objects that you want lit up as static. And we'll show you a demo of this shortly. If you don't do that, they're not going to be included in this little map that Unity is going to create. So if you want dynamic lighting, then you need to place what are called light probes around your scene that detect how the light is going to hit those points at various times for your dynamic objects. And Matt's going to show off a demo of that shortly. The other important thing is turn down ambient light in your scene. Now, Matt, why would you want to turn down ambient light?
So your ambient light is kind of like you can think of it as like the shadows in your scene, right? The darker you make your ambient light, the darker your shadows are going to be. It's kind of the places that aren't lit, essentially. There's a lot of cool things you can do with ambient light, and a couple of those would be, you can actually change like the whole tone of your level just by changing the ambience and changing the darks and the color of the darks. Maybe the darks aren't essentially black, maybe they're more of like blues or reds, just to kind of give it a different feel. Things with that work great are when you're doing like daytime lighting, or if you're doing like kind of mood lighting in different settings for night and stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Set the mood of your game.
I mean,
that's right.
essentially, yeah, you're creating mood lighting for your game.
Lit.
No, absolutely. Yeah, candlelight, you'd probably want to do like nice like dark reds and stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Dinner on my mind already, and it's still early morning. More importantly, what are we having for dinner today?
Yeah, right.
So then you'll want, after you turn on your ambient light, so kind of like the background, the glow in your game, Unity always has a little bit of light color in your scene. So you're going to turn on the ambient light, then you're going to set your quality settings, because you can really define on how hardcore you want that light calculation to take place, how good you want all those light and shadows to look on there.
That's something to keep note of too, because when you work on the quality settings of the light, that it really depends on the PC you're using too. If you're using like a really, really hardcore PC and you want to really get amazing lights baked, crank those settings up high. It's going to take a while. It's going to take you hours probably to get a really, really nice.
Yes.
Yeah, the higher the settings, the longer the baking process takes. But if you're using like a laptop that's not exactly up to snuff, it's like a rendering machine or anything like that, maybe crank the settings down to do a quick bake. But what that'll do is that'll give you an idea, right? And when you're looking at your level, which we'll go over when we go over the demo on light baking, you're not going to get an exact result of what the baking is actually going to look like when you have your finished product. It just kind of gives you an idea even when you're not baked. You're just kind of getting a loose reference. That's why you want to do a quick bake at low settings, just to kind of get an idea of what the lights are going to look like. And you're going to have little refraction errors and different rendering errors in there, because when the settings are so low, it can't process all that information, right?
It's a trade-off. Those maps are smaller.
It's a trade-off. You have smaller
faster.
maps, exactly. So the memory, it's not going to do it exactly how you want it, but it's going to give you a good idea. So I always recommend, when I'm doing my baking, first thing I do is when I'm baking, What you're doing, it's actually like baking. Like you're putting something, you're setting a timer on it, you're letting it go, and then it finishes, right? And you get the finished product.
We're gonna put in our cake into the Unity oven and cook it at 350.
Yeah, exactly.
Cake, food, dinner.
But baking takes a while, right? Just like normal baking takes a while. So you want to do a quick bake first, kind of just see what it's going to look like, and then once you kind of get an idea, okay, that's going in the direction I want. It has the colors on there I want. Then you can crank those settings up, or maybe go to a higher powered machine, really put some heavy settings on there, and get a really good bake done. And I recommend that for just before you go to production, right? I mean, not production, but release, right? When your release candidate's almost ready, that's when you want to take the time and get those really, really great light bakes going. And that's like your massive light bakes for your levels, like the overview light bakes that encompass everything, right? And it's going to take hours to get those done.
What's the longest that you've ever had to wait for a light to bake in a scene on a game you've worked on?
I think the longest so far, I mean, I've only been doing mobile, but to get really good ones, I think the longest one I did was like 12 hours.
12 hours.
And that was like a really, really complicated level with lots and lots of lights.
I'll bake this, I'll get
thousands
I'll
of
come
lights.
back, this will be done, and you're just waiting.
Yeah, like the shadows were out of control. There was all kinds of things going on. So
after you bake the light, one of the important things to remember, turn off the lights in your scene when you're done baking.
A lot of people forget to do that. So what you want to do is after you do your light baking, you've got this really great, well-baked scene, which is essentially, light baking, I don't know if people know, what it basically does is it's applying almost like a vertex color layer over all of your geometry. So it's essentially faking a layer of lit color over everything. So it appears that everything's lit, but essentially it's not. It's just kind of faked. And nobody will know when they're playing the game, right? Unless you're doing dynamic lights and like the sun's moving from one point to another, that's when you're gonna use actual lighting. And even then you might do a combination of light baking and some type of other dynamic lighting system. But one of the things you really wanna remember is after you get that light baking done, always go in and turn your lights off because you're not going to need them. Like that's just extra. There's no reason to have them there unless you're going for a specific effect that requires those lights to be on. But if you're not, turn them off. It's going to look great and it's going to run a lot faster. You're going to save on a ton of draw calls and your game's just going to be sped way up.
And turn your ambient light back up afterwards. So beforehand, you turn your light down.
Cool. Yeah.
And then bake it, turn your lights off, turn that ambient light back up. So you got to remember that initial value, and you'll demo that when you kind of go over this year.
Yeah, and I would say I always do forget to turn the ambient light back on, but you'll notice right away when you play your game and your characters look very dark or the color of like the shadows, and you're like, what is going on? When you do light probes, you won't notice it as much, but definitely turn that ambience back up because it's going to do two things. I think it's, from a stylistic standpoint, it's going to kind of improve the visibility of your characters and overall characters in your scene, and anything that's dynamic, you're going to see a little bit better. So it's a rule of thumb for me. I always go back in, have a little note to myself, go in, turn that ambience back up, and then you're ready to go.
So
turn those lights off.
This slide deck sheet that we have here, print that up and tack it to the wall.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good rule of thumb. Yeah, absolutely.
Remember, all the red. Turn off lights in the scene. I should actually highlight in red there. Turn ambient back up. So let's go on and move on to a demo for baking light and setting light probes, and we're going to switch over to Matt, and I think he's going to show us how to do that in a scene inside of Unity here.
Okay, so
Looking scene.
If anybody didn't see this yesterday, this was our demo project we created for the Virtual Academy lesson. This is the zombie pumpkin slayers.
Yes.
And
ZPS in the house.
ZPS, yeah, we kind of came up with this at the last second, but just a quick overview. The game's about a zombie protecting his graveyard from invading evil pumpkins, right?
Pumpkins.
So for the demo, we made a quick little graveyard scene, and it's just kind of a straightaway right here with a central element that you're here to protect, which is your cross. And what we want to do for this purpose of this demo is we want to light bake this scene and make it look great, right? So what I did was, you'll notice in here, I've got a couple lights, and these were kind of like mood lighting elements that I wanted to highlight certain things. And you're going to notice that when you're light baking your scenes, you're going to get like, a rough kind of representation of how the lights are going to look. It's not going to be exactly how the finished product's going to look when you export, but that's why you do baking, because baking is going to give you that final result. So what I do is in here, you can see I've added all these lights into my scene. And this is to kind of give my scene a certain type of look, right? I wanted the directional light, which is your main light. I wanted that to be a certain way so that the shadows were cast across the area that you're going to run, just to kind of give it a feeling, another feeling of ambience. And maybe the moon is kind of where you're looking from. I wanted to add kind of more of a green tone because from a stylistic standpoint, I thought that just kind of fit with what we were doing. And just little kind of lights here and there just to kind of dress up the mood and what we're doing. I kind of added this warm light right here from these fake God rays that I put into the scene.
So to be clear, those are just, explain what those God rays are.
So essentially all it is just, it's basically, you're protecting this element, right? And I wanted to create a visual piece that kind of identified that element in the center of the game. And so all those are just a nice visual element to kind of guide you of, this is the thing you have to protect, right? This is the holy element that is the center of your protection of your game. So your zombie has to to fend off from the pumpkins that are coming in and trying to fight this.
What are those made up of? What exactly are the God rays?
So all this is just a fade in Photoshop in the texture over my UV shell. So I have a UV shell and I just did a little fade graphic on it and exported it out as a transparent graphic on a PNG. Use that. When we get into optimization, I'll show you how I used the fade graphic for those little rays also on my plants and everything else, which is part of optimization. You want to cram as much stuff into a texture as you can to save on draw calls. But from there, let's get into the light baking and show you how light baking process, how it actually works, right? So we have these different lights in our scene, right? We've got these point lights kind of for little mood lighting and highlight areas. I kind of want to highlight the path a little bit. We have a directional light, which I chose kind of a bluish color because it's nighttime. Wanted to give it almost like a moonlit kind of feel.
And the directional light is kind of like a sun in the sky in a sense, a little bit of...
Exactly. And I usually use 1 to 2 directional lights in my scene, depending on what I'm doing. If I'm doing like a space kind of thing, you have light kind of going in different directions, so I'll probably use 2 different directional lights, maybe cast in different directions. Whereas if I'm doing like a daytime or nighttime scene, I'm going to use 1 directional light just to kind of get that main source of light from your outside, wherever, into a scene where you can cast your shadows, really see those shadows nicely.
Cool.
So for here, we chose 1 directional light. We kind of did a bluish color, wanted to cast it, make it look like a moonlight. And then I kind of just added some extra point lights to give it, a feeling, a style. I didn't want it to be just blue, just moonlight. Wanted it to feel like, it was kind of this zombie-ish cemetery. So I figured green and blue worked really, really well for that. So let's get into light baking, right?
Yeah.
So what we're gonna do is, now that we have our lights in our scene, what I like to do always as a rule of thumb, anytime I create lights or main lights that are gonna be baked into a scene, I always put those in a folder called lights, right? And what I do, and you can even write a note to yourself on that, like, for example, always turn off before build, right? And that's just to know that, like we said before, you always want to turn those lights off right here. That's your lights folder. There's all my lights inside. I've got my directional light and all my point lights. You want to turn that off right before you do your build, right? And even when you're just testing, you want to turn those off too, because you want to keep an eye on your draw calls and things like that.
And by turning off, can you show kind of the little checkbox in the upper right-hand corner there? Maybe zoom in on that so the folks can see that.
Absolutely. So you see I have my lights folder selected here, right? And if I want to turn those off, right here, where my lights are in the inspector, there's that little checkbox right there. All you have to do to turn those off is just click that off. And then you see my lights go off on the scene. You can see right now, because I haven't baked my lights, there's a pretty dramatic difference between having your lights on and having them off.
Definitely.
So as I turn them on and off, you'll see on, you see all the lights, and you can even see the rays and the radiuses of all those lights and where those lights are being cast. And you can see them off with nothing but the ambience of the scene.
Lighting makes such a difference.
Oh, it does. Absolutely. Absolutely. And there are times, some people, there are reasons to not even use lighting sometimes. It just depends on what you're trying to accomplish in your project. So for now, what we're going to be doing is, like we said, light baking. So let's turn our lights back on. You make sure here that you've got those on. Always make sure that your lights are check marked. Again, put them in a folder, kind of like I did, and that just helps keeping things organized in your project, because when you start getting 4,000 to 5,000 things in your project, you really, really want to start organizing and putting them down. I mean, in our environment alone in here, you can just see that there's tons of stuff that we have in this environment. So it's just a good idea to really start organizing your things and putting them in different folders.
Just create a game object, drop them all into that game object, and away you go. Organize.
Absolutely, absolutely. So to get started with light baking, all we're going to do is we're going to go to Window, Light Mapping, and that's going to bring up this light mapping window. And this is essentially the window you're going to do all your baking in. And we just want to make sure that we have all our lights selected, which they are.
And to clarify, I think baking is a pro feature, if I recall correctly on here.
I do believe that's correct. Yeah, baking is only available to the pro versions of Windows. or I mean, of Windows, of Unity. So just make sure that if you want to do light baking, that you are using that Pro version.
One of the advantages of Pro version. So we're going to kind of do a mix of things today between some Pro, some not Pro. So just keep in mind, some of the things we are showing today are Pro, some of the techniques are not Pro.
Absolutely. So when you're in this light mapping window, the next thing you're going to want to do is go into the Bake tab right there, right in the center. Go to that Bake tab, and then you're going to get all these different options. And to start, we've actually kind of reduced the amount of options that are in there, but I think when you initially start, this will probably be the lock atlas and the resolution settings will probably be at 30 texels per world unit, I think is the default. And then, if you can see right there, when you initially open it up, that'll probably be at 30. I've actually knocked that down to 2 because this is more of a mobile kind of simple game, maybe a browser-based game. So I definitely want to reduce that. And what that's going to do is essentially the higher that resolution is, the more light maps it's going to produce, right? So when it's set at 30, it's going to know that, oh, I can go all the way up to 30 for the resolution of these light maps I'm going to create.
And it's going to take a lot longer.
Yeah, and what it's doing is essentially it's creating 1024 by 1024 resolution images that are your light maps that are using to layer over this entire project.
Oh, cool.
Taking all those UVs and making these basically shaded elements that fit over everything. So what you want to do is just as a rule of thumb, just get in there, knock that down. Especially when you're making a test light map, it's a good idea to knock that resolution down too. Your gather rays, I think when it starts, it's set at 6,000 or 8,000, or maybe 4,000. I know it's definitely higher than 1,000, but you want to knock that down too. For a rule of thumb for me, 1,000 always seems to be a pretty good start. You could go even lower than that if you just want to test, but I'd say 1,000 usually gives you a pretty nice result to start, and it's not too taxing on most of the machines I've used. So you want to kick that down to about 1,000 as well.
Oh, cool.
And then from there, I usually do, to start, I do dual light maps because the result is a little better. But if you're doing a mobile project, you probably want to change it to single light maps. And that's just going to give you one light map, right? It's going to try to reduce everything into one light map. And that will change when you change the resolution too. It will actually make more light maps depending on how many you have. But for now, let's start with dual light maps. Let's set the quality to high. I've never really experienced too many problems of setting low or high quality, so that never really seemed to be an issue for me. But to get started, we'll show you what you do. Once you get those settings set up and you have your resolution down and your gather rays, which are essentially all the rays from the light shooting in different direction, turn those down. We'll knock those down to 1,000. You just want to click Bake Scene.
Actually, you know what? I believe I misspoke on something. It was reversed between this one and the next one. I think the light mapping is included in the free.
Oh, okay.
The static batching is a Pro-only feature.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. If you have the free version, you can light bake away.
Very cool.
So if you're following along, so here we are right now. We're in the bake settings. We've reduced our gather rays. We've reduced our resolution settings. And now you just want to go and you want to click the Bake Scene button.
Bake Scene.
And you'll notice in here there are a couple different things. There are a couple different options. There's selected probes. You can actually bake objects alone by themselves if you just want to bake a particular object. But for now, we're just going to bake the scene, and we'll get into baking probes a little bit later in the optimization module. So for now, we click Bake Scene, and you'll see it brings up the exporting to Beast dialog, and then it bakes the scene. You'll notice there's not a lot of progress things happening. You don't really know like what's going on. Just look in the corner, and you'll see this little progress area, which basically tells you it's being light baked. And for now, I got these two light bakes. It gave me 2 light maps, right? But you'll see they kind of look a little light. And on here, I'm not really getting those shadows that I really wanted. If you notice when I had the preview, I could see some shadows and some different things. And that's because my ambient light was not set. And these right here, these are dynamic shadows. These really, really dark ones those are dynamic shadows being cast from the lights that are currently on in the scene. So you know that those have nothing to do with the light map that's being baked. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna rebake this light map and I'm gonna turn my ambience down. And it's a good thing that I did that because you see how light the light maps are. It's kind of a good indicator that, oh, my ambience was actually too high. So what you wanna do is go into your edit up here. And then in edit, you wanna go down to your render settings. Once you click your render settings in your inspector, you're going to get all these different options. Fog, fog mode, linear fog, ambience. And this is what we want to concentrate on, is your ambient light. And so from your ambient light, you'll see it's kind of a light gray color I have in there now. That is what we talked about. That's kind of like the ambience.
Setting the mood.
It's setting the mood. So what we want to do is we want to go in there, just click in the color of the ambient light, and it's going to give you this color box dialog, right? So if everybody does that, you'll get this, and you'll see it's set to, right now, this kind of light gray color. And we want to turn that down. So we open that back up. let's do kind of like a darkish blue color. So we'll take this slider and move this down to about right there. Just like that, and you'll see my ambient light is now a dark blue, and I'm just gonna rebake my scene really quickly with that new ambience light. And if you can see the scene now, let me just back up.
You're just trying to move this to a darker color.
Yeah, I really want to get those shadows, right? I didn't get those shadows last time, so this is what this is gonna do. So you'll see, I don't really see those shadows, but I wanna see them. So now we're gonna rebake this, bake the scene. And you'll see it has your little calculation in the corner. It's baking the texture.
Baking. 350 degrees for 7 minutes.
And now you see it's a little bit darker.
Look at that.
And the resolution of the shadows isn't great, but I can definitely see them a lot better. And that's because I knocked my resolution down so much, right? So I'm not getting that super high res shadows, crisp shadows